Hello, everybody. We are back with Miss Hailey Modin today for Lender Lowdown. Hailey, what is going on in the world of rates?
Yeah, we have trended up a little higher for the mortgage rates, and kind of everybody's holding their breath. There's a lot of economic data coming out in the next week to 10 days or so here and in early November. And so we will kind of see how the market rides that out. But right now we are getting closer to 7% than we are to 6. So it's a little bit hard on
Hmm.
the market.
Are you seeing kind of just a pullback then from people that maybe were jumping back in or like,
Yes, everybody, it feels like holding their breath almost, and just kind of writing out, see what's, happening, what's going to happen. And like sellers are just kind of sitting with homes on the market for a little bit longer, I think. And buyers are definitely holding back on putting in offers. And they're like, well, the house might still be there next week. And they're not feeling a sense of urgency necessarily to jump in and get a deal. So, yeah, that's kind of what I'm seeing at least. Is that similar to what you're seeing, Emily?
Well, I was just thinking, honestly, it's so interesting because I feel like the last time we had talked, it was kind of this new excitement for rates were lowering and
Yeah.
there was kind of this excitement in the market and things were moving along. And now all of a sudden it's kind of like this cool down with the weather, to where people, as you said, are just kind of, they're keeping things very close to home.
For
So
sure. I'm seeing that absolutely.
yeah. I think today, a situation that kind of came up in my world that you could speak to is a low appraisal. Well, the potential of one. I haven't had it yet, but it could come. Are you seeing a lot of those with the way that the market is, or how often is that kind of coming up for you?
Yeah, I
And
would
if you
say
can kind of
low.
define low appraisal as well.
Yeah, of course. So low appraisal is when the assessed or appraised value of a home is lower than the purchase price or the agreed upon purchase price. And so I see that very rarely, to be honest. It's
Mhm.
amazing how appraisers can find the value we need sometimes. And I would say there's kind of three main reasons why there'll be a low appraisal. And so the number one reason I see it is when a buyer offers more than the asking price, or the listing
Mhm.
price on a home. That's going to be pretty common reason for a low appraisal, because the appraiser will see what the original list price was, and then they'll see the purchase and sale agreement for the higher amount. Now you might ask, why would a buyer like offer more than the list price? Generally, that's because of market conditions. They'll maybe be competing with multiple buyers on the same deal, and so they want to offer more, entice the seller to take their offer. But they also offer more on purchase price or go over asking price if they want a seller concession. And so then the seller would net the same, and the buyer would be like, "Hey, I'm going to go 10,000 high. I'd like a $10,000 credit." Kind of a wash for the seller, but an advantage for the buyer. So that's kind of another time where there could be a low appraisal. Two other common reasons. One is for our homes, especially in Spokane County here, that are a little further out, a little more rural.
Mhm.
Those homes, sometimes it's harder to find comparable
Sure.
properties, right? And so if there's a lack of comparables, and even if there are comparable homes, but they haven't sold recently,
Oh.
then that can be really hard for an appraiser to find the value. And then the third reason that I see is sometimes there's just a mistake somewhere. Maybe the appraiser didn't correctly measure the square footage of the home, and so their like price per square foot is really funky. Sometimes there's been recent home improvements, or upgrades to the home that the appraiser is not aware of. And sometimes I'm trying to think. Oh, sometimes appraisers don't include like an outbuilding, like if there's multiple sheds or barns or garage or something, just to make sure all of those are accounted for in the value. So that's kind of why I see a low appraisal. Does that kind of make sense?
That does. As far as the outbuildings
Yeah.
and updates, so I would think updates that maybe are not commonly that you couldn't see. So you walk in and you see like a kitchen's fully remodeled. So an update that they wouldn't notice maybe is like new electrical or a new HVAC system. Who would you say which party is responsible for giving the appraiser that information?
Yeah, and that's actually, I was going to share two tips for sellers to help prevent low
Okay.
appraisals. And that's one of them is put together a list of recent upgrades or improvements to the home. And
Mhm.
that could be, like you said, yeah, those little bit more hidden factors. Like sometimes like in-floor heating in a bathroom, like underneath
Oh,
the tile. Like that might be something the appraiser doesn't notice, but that's pretty luxurious, it could be an upgrade.
yeah.
Something like a tankless like water heater or yeah, extra insulation if you had extra insulation put into the home, or like you said, yeah, HVAC system, that kind of stuff. Make a list as a seller to give to the appraiser. So usually the listing agent will be the one to
Sure.
communicate that with the appraiser and be like, hey, here are the upgrades, and then also include the date of when those updates were completed. So
Mm,
if they were like within the last year or two, or just since the home's been owned by the new owners, that would be really helpful for sure. And then the other tip I have for sellers to help prevent low appraisals is first impressions actually do matter a little bit for appraisals.
okay.
So like if the home is clean and in really like tidy condition, and
Okay.
that goes for like the outside and the inside of the home. And so that can just give the appraiser kind of a strong sense of like the home's well taken care of, add a little bit of value, potentially just
Sure.
based on the condition they find the home.
Yeah,
So
both really good tips. That's interesting. I
it is.
honestly wouldn't have thought about, yeah, giving the list. I know that a lot of people were doing that during COVID just because
Mm,
so many people were asking over, and a lot of those people, somehow there was just like this huge amount of cash in the world at that point.
yeah.
People were pulling out of their safes and go digging and up the jars out of their backyard, but they would put an additional down, which is a form that we use.
Yeah.
But yeah, they were really on it when it came to the appraisal, as far as like even providing comps of things that had closed in the
Right.
last 30 days, saying that it is worth the value that it is, just because the market at that point in time was moving so fast. So that's
Yeah.
interesting. So, a scenario for you, if the home is listed for, let's say, 850, and then the loan amount, so the buyers are putting $300,000 down. So the loan amount then at that point is what, 550? Um, and the appraisal came in low. How does that work as far as like, can that large down payment go towards that, or
Yeah, that's a really good question. So there's kind of three different steps that we like to do if we like go through if we get a low appraisal. And so the first one is generally a renegotiation of value. And so we can go back to the appraiser if, like you said, you hadn't given the list initially with the upgrades, or you want to come back to the appraiser with some more comparable properties that the agents have found, buyers agent or the seller's agent could come and be like, hey, we have some more comps. We want to go back to the appraiser
okay.
and ask for reconsideration of value. That's usually our first course of action if we really feel like we could get the additional value out of it.
Mhm.
And sometimes that even could mean a total second appraisal. Rarely is that the case. Usually the first appraiser will take whatever reconsideration of value
Oh,
request
okay.
we have. So we can go that route. And then the next route would be a negotiation between the seller and the buyer. And so sometimes if you can negotiate, you can split the cost, whatever. There's different ways to negotiate that where the agents come in really handy. And then the third option is yes, like you had mentioned, if the buyer can just bring that extra cash to the table. In the scenario you mentioned, the 300,000 should be able to go towards covering that $50,000 appraisal gap.
Mhm.
And from the lender side, it would just be the down payment. The loan would be done on the $800,000 value. But if the buyer thinks the home is worth that 850 and they're
Yeah.
willing to bring that 50,000, that's all good. So yeah, definitely extra cash can help a lot when it comes to low appraisals. I think the challenge is that buyers generally get shy about paying more than the appraised value. And that's just because they don't want to be, upside down on the home, or like if for
Yeah.
some reason they did need to sell it, being concerned that they would be able to sell it for what they're purchasing it for. So, yeah, that's kind of
Well, I'm sure in
helpful.
that situation, like you as the lender are very objective as far as like, here's what we have. And so then at this point, you as the buyer, like it's up to you as to what you want to do. And as a realtor, I think if they were my buyers, I would just advise on like, how much do you love the home? Is the seller really not willing to meet you in the middle at all? And short and long-term goals. Are you going to be in the house for 20 years? Because then
Yeah.
you'll definitely get the $50,000 back, likely. Or are you think you're only going to be here for 3 to 5 and we don't have a crystal ball and don't know what's going to happen in the market? And at that point, I mean, you just have to be cautious of the investment that you're making.
Absolutely. Yeah. And like you said, we're trying to stay like pretty objective with our, you know, recommending things and not recommending things because yeah, value is a kind of a sensitive topic and it really comes down to would we be able to sell that home to a different buyer for that same price? Like would the
Mm,
market support that value? And if they do, that's great. And if not, you know, maybe it's a one buyer situation and like that
yeah,
buyer thinks it's worth a lot more than maybe just the general market population would.
sure. So you talked about if it does come in low and then there's additional conversations with that
Mhm.
appraiser. Sometimes they do go back out and there is a reappraisal,
Yeah.
which there is a fee for, correct?
There can be. It depends.
Mhm.
So I would say if there is a fee, it's usually in the ballpark of $150. So
Oh,
it's
so it's
not
not like the
too
full
crazy.
amount.
Yeah, and that depends. If there is needs to be a second appraisal, it can be the full amount again. If you're having a whole different person appraiser come out to the property, but I would say generally for the reconsideration of value, there's generally no cost at all. It just depends on kind of how the lender has their appraisal system set up
Mm.
too. Yeah.
Do you know how the appraisal system works as far as like, do lenders work with multiple appraisers? Do they work with like one company and then there's an umbrella of appraisers below?
Good question. So, most lenders have a like board of appraisers that they will send out a request to. So,
Okay.
you know, that can be like 10 to 15 appraisers maybe, and they would send, you know, the appraisal order out to multiple, and then somebody would pick it up and, you know,
Okay.
whatever. Sometimes and like take it from there. But sometimes certain appraisers will add complexity fees. So if they need to travel
Oh,
an extra distance, or if the home has a lot of outbuildings, or yeah, just a couple of different reasons for complexities that could increase the cost of the appraisal. And sometimes that, you know, can vary on the type of loan, the type of, or the specific appraiser as well. So yeah,
sure.
appraisers
That
are
makes
third parties. They're not directly employed by the lender. So
Hmm.
yeah,
Okay, that makes sense.
good
Well, I mean,
question.
I feel like that was a lot of information on low
Yeah,
appraisals. What do you have anything else that you have to share, or kind of just your overarching opinion on?
yeah.
Here's
Uh,
and actually one more question for you before you summarize.
yeah, of course.
People that are purchasing a home for cash, specifically new construction, um, they don't have to get an appraisal because they are doing cash. However, would you advise?
Yeah, I feel like it can be very helpful in like giving a little bit more of an objective view of like what's out there. Now you could kind of meet in the middle instead of doing a full appraisal. If you're a cash buyer, you could have your real estate agent pull
Hmm.
comps and do kind of a current market analysis for that home to kind
Sure.
of just support the value of that home. Real estate agents are really great at using their resources and pulling together data in reports like that. And I've personally leaned on real estate agents often to help us with kind of getting a value for a home. And that kind of segues into what I was going to mention about refinances. So using a real estate agent to help us give it like an idea of how much a home is appreciated before we do a refinance. Because
Hmm.
most refinances will need an appraisal. Not all of them. Sometimes the appraisal gets waived. But if we need an appraisal, we want to kind of get a better idea of what that home value would be. And one of the biggest challenges of a refinance is not getting the value we need to include all of the refinance fees into the loan amount. And so that kind of just depends. And then our ratios, like how much you own a home versus how much it's worth. So your loan to value and all of those pieces depend on an appraisal. So using a real estate agent to help us get a current market analysis can be really helpful. And the other thing to know is when we do an appraisal for refinance, we cannot tell the appraiser we want the value to be this, or we believe the value
No.
is this. They have to go figure it out based on their actual objective reports. Now, when we do appraisal for a purchase, we do give them the purchase and sale agreement. They do know the value that we're looking for in that home. And so it is what it is. It's kind of a funky system, but that would just be something to note when you're refinancing if you feel like your value isn't as high as you would expect it to be.
Mm-hmm. I mean, is there the opportunity even at that point? Would you give the same tips as far like just make sure that your house is in the best condition, write out a list, and then if we need to
Yes.
maybe talk about the comps that they used and supply them with extra, we would just have that conversation then.
Yes, absolutely. And I really do think that list of upgrades has even more weight and like it's more helpful when we're doing a refinance to be like, hey, we added value to this property.
Yeah, that's a
So,
really good tip. I mean, I have that if I have a house that has a lot of those, I write it all out for the potential buyer, but I honestly never thought about
oh,
giving it to the appraiser. But
yeah.
they're gonna verify the value of the home, so it's probably pretty important for them to see
And
too.
they don't know what they don't know, and they
Yeah.
can only spend so much time like in the home. Like they're generally not crawling in, the attic or, looking too crazy close at things. So they'll definitely look at things for like the condition in which they're in, but the details, yeah, we can always help them out.
It's in the details. I love that. Well, anything else on top?
I don't think so. Yeah, I feel like appraisals are kind of one of those mystery, stressful parts of a transaction. So it's nice to kind of clear up a little mystery and
Yeah.
nothing to be scared of. We always have a next option.
So true. So true. I always say that too. Like there is always at least 1 to 3 different options of ways that we can
Yeah.
get around things. And it may not have been like the most ideal, but as long as everybody wants
Mhm.
to get to the closing table and we get there, that's what it is.
Yes, for sure, for sure.
Sweet. Well,
Well,
thank you.
awesome. Well, thanks for having me on.
Oh, yes, of course. Thank you for coming on each time. It's so educational, honestly, for me, and I hope for everybody else who listens. So we'll catch you next time.
Okay, sounds good.
How do I stop recording? Recording. Okay, maybe it's not going to let me stop recording and I have to leave. Well, anyway, thank you for your time today. I so
You're
appreciate
welcome.
it.
You're welcome. Did you stop the recording? I wasn't sure.
No, it's still recording. I can't figure out how to do it. I think I have to leave.
Oh, that's okay. Well, we can just log off. But good to see you and good to catch up. And you'll have to come meet Addie sometime soon.
Yes, I almost called you the other day. I don't know what I was doing, but then something else
Yes,
came up. But it is on my
totally.
list.
Yes, please, please, please. If you have time even later today, just let me know. But yeah.
Okay, sounds good. I will.
Okay. Bye.
Bye.